Hey guys, this is Tanner Invest here. Thank you guys so much. This is now my 6th video on BMNR, SBET, and the ETH digital asset treasuries out there. And I've had a lot of success, over 25,000 views, over 1,000 likes, because I've not only, just pushing and being really bullish on these strategies. I think what I'm doing is trying to educate and trying to let you guys know what the mNAV is, how to calculate mNAV, how to calculate ETH per share, how to make the best decision today. If you want to buy one into one of these, well, where would you go? What would you look at? And so I would recommend checking out some of my other videos, but in today's video I'm actually going to dive into my strategy. So in the rest of 2025, I think my strategy is going to be acquire more ETH exposure. And so there's multiple ways you can get ETH exposure. It's not only directly through Ethereum. You can now buy directly into these digital asset treasuries like BMNR, which is Bitmine Emerging Technologies, ran by Tom Lee. And then there are other ones like Sharplink Gaming, ran by the co-founder himself of Ethereum, which is Joseph Lubin. We've dove into a ton of this before, so I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but it's really exciting stuff, guys. There's actually an equation I'm going to get into because I want you guys to understand the difference between, what is the difference between me just buying Ethereum and then me buying one of these digital asset treasuries? Now, there's also another way you can get exposure into Ethereum. It's not just through these stocks. There's actually other stocks within the market today that you could buy that have some sort of a correlation to Ethereum, whether it's through like a brokerage firm like Robinhood Technologies, where Robinhood, you buy that stock trades very cyclical based on the performance of cryptocurrencies. So that's one way that you can get in, because when more cryptocurrency is being traded and there's higher volumes, they actually make a pretty big take rate on that on those trades. The same story for Coinbase, and they're actually a lot higher take rate than Robinhood has. So there's other ways I'm going to get into. But other than that, today I'm going to go over some more bullish sentiment and like why I want to put more money in, and then how I'm doing that. And then I'm also going to show you some news. I know last video I covered a lot more on the BMNR side. Today I want to get a little bit more into SBET here at the end of the video. I'm going to have timestamps below, guys, so please, if you feel like you want to skip a part, feel free. But also I'm going to link in the description the playlist. I highly recommend checking out if you are still kind of curious about these digital asset treasuries. There's a lot that goes into it, and I don't want you to make a mistake when you're purchasing, because when you're purchasing, I think matters a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and hop in here and switch my screen over. So we have a video here that I want to start because I talked about this in my last video, but ultimately listening to this over and over, I talked about how it made me want to literally run through a brick wall. I'm not kidding. Like, this stuff gets me so excited. Tom Lee was asked by on CNBC, what percentage of your portfolio should you have in cryptocurrencies today? And here was Tom Lee's answer.
But what do you want your holding to look like? Crypto versus stocks versus other things?
Well, in 2017, when we first wrote about Bitcoin, we recommended 1% to 2% into crypto. That has been 100x for our clients. Today, we're saying if you're starting, 5 to 10% is appropriate for the median investor. If someone's younger and they can let time work in their favor, then 20% or more makes sense. That's consistent with the BlackRock mathematical calculations. And again, I think there's still a lot of upside. Just keep in mind, Wall Street is running into the blockchain right now.
All right, guys. So he's telling people that, if you're young, maybe having a 20% exposure to cryptocurrency within your portfolio today would make a lot of sense. He even mentioned back in 2017, if you had listened to Tom Lee back in 2017, you had 1% to 2% of your portfolio allocated into cryptocurrency, it would have 100x by now, which most likely would have been Bitcoin, of course. I wish I listened in 2017, but I am listening now. My ears are wide open. And so there's another video real quick of Joseph Lubin. And this is what I want to warn you guys just a little bit, okay? Because these guys, Tom Lee and Joseph Lubin, now have more exposure to ETH than anyone, which not only means are they bullish naturally, but they're also now they're kind of bullish on a bias perspective as well, because they really want the price to go up. They're pumping this a lot of ways. They have, on their X accounts, they're pumping it. On CNBC, they're going live and talking about Ethereum daily. And so I want you guys to know that although, it's great to listen to these bulls and listen to everything they say. They might not be correct because people have been super bullish. You know, if you recall back in 2017, Tom Lee talked about buying Bitcoin. There were people back in 2017 that thought in 2025, Bitcoin would already be well over $1 million. Like if you go listen to some things that Michael Saylor has said, where he still thinks Bitcoin will be millions of dollars, which I kind of believe that too in the very long run, but it all is about time perspective, guys. Like over time, how's that going to be? Now, let's listen to this because Joseph Lubin might be a little too bullish, and here's what he has to say.
We talked about the flippening, where Ether will eclipse the monetary base size of Bitcoin. Some people think that'll never happen. Some people think that'll take a few years. I think we may see astonishing things in the next year or so, especially with these treasury companies driving things.
Okay, so he's saying now that these treasury companies are driving things, there are some people out there that think that a flippening will happen. So they will think that eventually Ethereum will surpass the total market cap volume of Bitcoin. And if you guys recall, what a lot of people have been saying for years is that eventually Bitcoin will surpass the total volume of gold because Bitcoin is a way of like a digital gold is what people say, which I agree with that statement. And so let's take a look at these different, the rankings of these digital, or not digital assets, all of the assets across the world by market cap. So we can see here, gold is still by far let me zoom in a little bit, guys. Sorry about that. Gold is still by far the highest market cap. No question, $23.2 trillion. And the second biggest asset in the world is NVIDIA, which is my largest position in my portfolio, leading AI with chips. But you can tell, I mean, compared to even gold, they're not even a fifth. They're more like between a fifth and a sixth of the price of gold. Now, what's down here? Rank number 7, we have Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, if it were a company, just a company, it'd be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th largest company. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click into that, in the world. Now, Bitcoin obviously isn't a company. Bitcoin is very decentralized, so it's kind of like the opposite of a company in a way. But 2.3 trillion. So guys, like we still are actually right at about 1/10 of the size that Bitcoin is today of gold. Now, this video obviously isn't about Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency, you know, and Ethereum, and we have some stutters out there thinking that there may be a flippening. So what would that mean? It means Ethereum would need to pass Bitcoin. Now let's scroll down. Let's keep going. We're going past TMC. We're going past TSMC, Tesla, Berkshire Hathaway, Walmart, Oracle, Visa, Tencent, Eli Lilly, MasterCard, Netflix. Boom, right there. In the 27th position, we have Ethereum at a $508 billion market cap. $508 billion, guys. That's big. Obviously, it's the 27th largest asset in the world, but do you agree that there's still some room here to run based on global currency, based on the fact that, you know, there's a ton of young people collecting so much money from their parents after they've passed away. Money's being passed down. What are these people doing? You know, that's kind of the big bull thesis around, you know, companies like Robinhood who think that, hey, we're going to have a large amount of money supply. Also, keep in mind, guys, right now, we have like $7 trillion sitting in market settlement funds because the interest rates are so freaking high right now. What's going to happen when those interest rates drop here soon, hopefully in September, October, we might get a couple rate cuts this year. A lot of people are going to shift money out of those settlement funds because they're collecting, you know, an APY of like say 4%, 3.5%, somewhere around there. They're going to maybe shift the money out of that and put it into the market or put it into digital currencies. And so I think there's still a ton of room to grow here. And if we can get Ethereum, you know, even if Ethereum catches up to Bitcoin and has a flippening based on today's prices, you know, we'd still have to over 4x. So which would put Ethereum roughly like, you know, that $16, $17 price target, a little bit higher. But Bitcoin would have to have stayed at the same level, which I don't really foresee that happening, guys. I don't know if there ever will be a flippening. If I had to guess, I'd probably say no. But some people clearly out there think that that's a possibility. So let's go ahead and get into the price action, guys. And then after price action, I'm going to get into what my strategy is for the remainder of 2025. And so this week, guys, Ethereum, we have officially reached $4,000 and have reached past that. Now, as you see here, we're now 4,200. We actually peaked up at a little over $4,300. We're up 20% this week on Ethereum. And I want to stop here to say, I've mentioned this in my other videos. Ethereum is the key to this whole strategy working, guys. Like if you're invested in BMNR, if you're invested in SharpLink, we're not fighting against each other. We're not fighting against each other at all. We all have an underlying asset called ETH that we want to rise. And so at the end of the day, this is what everyone should be looking at, because this is the price. We've looked at ETH per share equations. We've looked at the multiple on the net asset value equations. All of that correlates to Ethereum. And so I do want to talk about Bitcoin as well, since we were on that subject. Now, let's take a look real quick over the past 5-year history, for example. Ethereum's up, solid 983. I bet back in, 5 years ago, 2020, I bet you put in at when Ethereum was $390. I bet you wish you did. We're at about 982% return, and Bitcoin, we're at around a 900% return. So over the past 5 years, these assets actually have performed relatively similar, while Ethereum actually has actually, well, that's actually crazy. I didn't realize that was the case. Let's look over the year. Bitcoin's up 95%. Ethereum's up 62%. So still not beating them on the year. But guys, this is incredible. I think we still have a ton of room to grow here. Now, BMNR and SBET specifically, let's look at these weekly charts. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention. Bitmine has been popping off. And remember, guys, there is something called multiple net asset value that we've talked about in previous videos. And I'm going to get into today's price, Friday's price. But we need to be careful, because when the mNAV will raise too high, Bitmine has every right to do so, to dilute shareholders, because they can do an at-the-money offering if they feel like their stock's overvalued. They can dilute shareholders at a price here by issuing shares, selling it to people willing to buy at that price, and likely the stock would drop from there because there was dilution that occurred. And so be careful, because right now BMNR is trading at a significant premium even to SharpLink Gaming, which we will get into. As you see, over the past week, SharpLink has kind of gone hand in hand with Ethereum, because if we remember, we just looked at the Ethereum chart. They're up about 20%. SharpLink Gaming's up about 22.78%. That's what I like to see, like a 1-to-1 correlation. That's pretty good. So SharpLink at this point in time, given the fact that Ethereum has rose over the past week, I think SharpLink is still looking like a really good play here. While personally, I think BMNR is looking a little pricey at this price point. But since I put into the portfolio, we are at 63% on BMNR position, and we are up 10% on SharpLink gaming position. So I did want to talk about this, because at the beginning of my video, I mentioned that there are different ways to have exposure into Ethereum, and Amit kind of hit the nail on the head here. Although I do listen to Amit, and I listen to his stream every single day, and he kind of understands the Ethereum Treasury play, but he doesn't quite understand dilution. And being a stock trader, when you hear the word dilution, it's this big, scary, scary word. And I've told you guys in my videos, in this case, guys, with these digital asset treasuries, you cannot be scared of dilution. That you cannot be scared of dilution, because it will happen. It will happen frequently. MicroStrategy has been diluting shareholders for years now. So will Tom Lee. So will Joseph Lubin. This is going to keep happening. So just get used to it. Now, what they're going to use, they dilute for purpose. It's not just to just do it. No, they're doing it because they want to accumulate more Ethereum. And a way you can accumulate more Ethereum is by raising capital, aka issuing shares, and then buying more Ethereum with that capital that you raised from that dilution event. So there's multiple ways. Right now, they've been doing the ATM offerings. We've talked about that in some videos here, but ATM offerings is probably the way, BMNR might do that this week even. If this stock price pumps on Monday or Tuesday, I would not be surprised if they were to go ahead and offer one, because at that point, they're trading at a very high premium, and Tom Lee knows that. Like if they're trading, if MicroStrategy is at a 1.7 premium and they're trading well above a 2, that tells him that, hey, we might be a little overvalued. Maybe we raise some money here to buy some more Ethereum, which in the end of the day, that's what we all want, guys, as shareholders. We want them to increase the amount of Ethereum per share. And so back to Amit's tweet, he does mention Robinhood is one of the best ways to, have indirect exposure into ETH. Now, at this point in time, I would advise against maybe into Robinhood, just because it's very overvalued. in my opinion, even though it's my second largest position. We'll get into my position here soon and what I plan on doing with my position. But there's also other ways like Coinbase. Coinbase is just like Robinhood, where they sell a ton of cryptocurrencies, and part of that, they get a take rate. So they trade equity, like Robinhood trades equities, they trade options, they trade cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are the main way these two brokerage firms actually get revenue, because they have a decent take rate every time someone buys or sells. And then there's also, BlackRock's ETF ETH. It's a great, way. It's an ETF that gives 1-to-1 exposure. And it's pretty cool because you can write things like covered calls against it, because it is an equity. If you own 100 shares, you can write covered calls. So he does make a good point here. Now let's go ahead and jump into this spreadsheet I made. And bear with me, guys. This is just a little image of Ethereum that I'm going to be dragging down just to show you line item by line item. So first, we're going to go over what my direct ETH exposure is, and I hope I'm zoomed in high enough, guys. Let me try to zoom in a little bit more. My direct ETH exposure. So the first thing we have is my Ethereum, right? So that's that 1-to-1. You just buy ETH. That's the best way to really have exposure to ETH, in my opinion, is just having the asset. And I won't say best, I'll say the most common. And so this is ETH. I have a value of $9,818, which is about 2.35 ETH, and my portfolio is only about 2.8% of my portfolio. SharpLink Gaming, SBET. I have 185 shares at a value of about 4.4 thousand. That's 1.3%. Then I have BMNR, only 45 shares, about half the percentage of my portfolio weighting as I do SBET currently. And then my total is only about 4.7% from ETH exposure. Now, if we recall back to Tom Lee's video, he said in cryptocurrencies, so cryptocurrencies as a whole, maybe 10 to 20%, even maybe more than 20% if you're really young. I'm 29 years old, guys. I'm going to get into that, but I think my ideal exposure to crypto is somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20%. I am a long-term equity trader by heart, but I am extremely bullish on the future of what digital currencies are going to bring to the world. So I definitely want to have a decent amount of exposure, especially given that I am young and can have a little bit more risk in case it doesn't work out, or in case we do go through another crypto winter, which we all know, like people are scared about another winter soon. I don't think another winter is going to happen, guys. I really don't, because now we have so much institutional backing. It's not the same. It's not just retail traders getting FOMO and then selling their crap and then getting not so excited about cryptocurrencies anymore. And then all of a sudden we're in a winter. Now we have institutional backers. We have huge companies that are going to be piling into this. And then we have retail investors who understand what a dip is, and they see a dip on, Bitcoin's down to 80K. That's going to get bought up pretty freaking soon. So I don't really believe in the whole narrative of having a crypto winter, guys, and I would not bank on that personally. Remember, we're still not even at all-time highs yet on Ethereum. We're not even at all-time highs. So now, indirect ETH exposure. This is what we were just talking about here. So I have two ways of indirect ETH exposure. One is kind of a stretch. The other is not a stretch at all. I've already talked about Robinhood. I don't really need to go more on Robinhood at all, but I do have $74,000 position in Robinhood with 650 shares with a 21% portfolio allocation. So that's a pretty big, hefty amount that is kind of intertwined with cryptocurrencies. Now, obviously, it's not a direct. That's why I'm calling this indirect ETH exposure. Now, my action, here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to be writing out of the money covered calls and use the premium to DCA back into direct ETH exposure. So I'm going to use, I'll actually show you some of these juicy option chains here. So we can see on Hood, it's selling calls expiring in 26 days. So here is in the money and out of the money. We're currently at a $115 price. I can sell out of the money calls, even up to in 26 days for $140 and collect $114 premium. And I have 650 shares. So I might do that with like maybe 200 or 300 of those shares to collect, 200, 300 bucks, and then plow that back into ETH, into ways of direct ETH exposure. Now, this one's a bit of a stretch. So I don't want to get any hates in the comments, but there is a little bit of a thesis around this next company, PayPal, and I want to tell you why. But PayPal, I'm going to sell my position. I have decided this weekend that I'm going to take my money out of PayPal. and I'm going to plow it into direct ETH exposure immediately. And the reason why is because, PayPal, there was this big push for, innovation within PayPal. They got a new CEO. They're buying back a ton of shares. So I was really like bullish on the company overall, maybe going up, outperforming the market, at least getting like a 15-20% return. I was over 20%. And then after their earnings, man, this stock just has the worst sentiment. I was down. Now I've lost like 15 to 20% of that position. And I'm now still in the green, but not nearly as much. But PayPal does have a little bit of exposure into cryptocurrencies, specifically on the ETH side because of stablecoins. So they actually have their own stablecoin, PayPal USD. And I was pretty bullish in the past that they were going to be one of the leaders in that. And honestly, guys, they haven't been. And I'm a little disappointed. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut my losses here. Technically not losses, but I have like a 6% gain in this position. I'm going to cut that and put it right into other positions. So let's go ahead and scroll down here. My new direct ETH exposure. So this is what I want to happen now with the shares of, this is what I'm going to do with the shares of SBET and BMNR. I'm going to take 40% of that position in PayPal, which is about $4,000, and about $6,000 into BMNR, and just buy it. That way I have an equal weight position. I actually did the math, and you can see here, if I put 40% of that into SBET and 60% of BMNR, I am very equal weight on both SBET and BMNR. And then my ultimate goal is, I'm going to go ahead and just delete this here, and we will see, this is my goal by the end of the year, is to have a 15% exposure into ETH, into these different methods. So we have, I want to have an equal weighting between the underlying asset itself, ETH, at 5%. I want to have 5% into Sharpling Gaming, and then I want to have 5% into BMNR. And so that would get me a total value of, 17,000 times 3, like 50,000, give or take. And I would have about 15% of my portfolio into ETH directly. That doesn't even include my Bitcoin, guys, because, Tom Lee didn't say 20% into Ethereum. He did say, 10 to 20% into cryptocurrencies. So I do plan on increasing my Bitcoin position as well, because I do think Bitcoin has some room to run here. So let's go ahead and look into the updated mNAV update, guys. I've been talking about Risk on Bobby, this guy named Ricky on X, for a while now. I think, I'd give him a follow because he puts in a ton of work to put out with all the ETH digital asset treasuries and compare their mNAVs, not only their current mNAV, but also their fully deployed mNAV. Now, as you see here, BMNR here in the second column here, they are now trading over, roughly a 2x on the multiple net asset value, and then a 1.6x on their fully deployed net asset value, which basically is just saying, hey, if they were to use all of the cash they have available based on the dry powder they have, if they were to just plow that all into ETH right now, this is what their multiple would be. Now, as you see, SBET is trading only at a 1.6, and then their fully deployed mNAV is at a 1.2. So significantly less expensive at the moment. And they also, as you see here, they have a lot more money. So SBET is actually, putting money like weekly into, more than weekly, into Ethereum. They have a ton of money yet to be deployed. And as you guys recall, these companies are both staking. So I did want to do real quick, I want to jump into this equation. Now, I don't want this to scare anybody away. Don't click away here. But what I wanted to show you guys, people have been asking, hey, what's the difference between just putting it into ETH and putting my money into one of these digital asset treasuries? So I asked ChatGPT to just give me an equation because it's pretty simple in my mind, and I wanted to make it simple for you guys. So this value of ETH is this variable here on the left, equals your initial investment. So let's just call this P number like $10,000. Say you're putting $10,000 into ETH. The price of ETH, the value of ETH, is going to be the initial investment times how the price in ETH has changed since you bought it, right? So if it's gone up 20%, this number would be like 1.2. If this number has gone down, if ETH's gone down 20%, this number would be like 0.8. So you take 10,000 times, let's say it went up 20%, that'd be 1.2, and you'd have $12,000. That would be the value of your unstaked ETH. And I'm using unstaked here because, guys, let's be real. How many people out there are actually buying ETH and staking it? A lot of people aren't. They're holding it in ETH itself and not staking it. So that's this equation. Now, BMNR and SBET, this is how their equation looks. So it's the value of BMNR equals the price of the initial investment multiplied by the change in the multiple on the net asset value times the same thing, the change in the price of ETH. But you got to remember, they're also staking basically every bit they have. BMNR has a 5%. They want to have the alchemy at 5% and have 5% of all ETH being staked. And SBET is already staking everything they have as well. So the main differences you're going to see here is the multiple. So let's go back. Let's go back to this. So let's say you buy here on BMNR today at a 2.0 multiple, but that multiple goes down to 1.5. Well, you better hope that Ethereum went up, because if Ethereum didn't go up, then you're probably going to have a lower position than today based on that multiple. Now, if you buy SBET here at 1.6 and SBET goes up to 2, you're probably going to see a pretty big ramp in the stock price because the multiple increased, right? So that's what that comes down to, guys. And then remember, they're staking, so they're getting roughly a 3% yield on every single bit of Ethereum that they have. I hope that made sense, guys. If that didn't make sense, let me know. I do plan on maybe even making a full video around like doing the math and like breaking it down even further. So feel free to follow along for that. Other than that, I did want to let you guys know, Sharplink Gaming has come out with a new like investor presentation. Oh, that's this. But okay, let's get into this actually for a second. So Sharplink, mark your calendars, August 15th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Sharplink's going to have their second quarter conference call. So they are going to be discussing financial and operating results for 3 and 6 month periods ending June 30th, 2025. And their executive team will host the event and press release with financial results will be issued prior to the call. So it's basically like an earnings call for Sharplink. Like that's awesome. I cannot wait for this call. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. And if you're an investor, I'd highly recommend as well. And then on their website, Sharplink did update their investor presentation. So if any of you guys are curious on the bull thesis, like I've talked about in my previous videos, but I highly would recommend just taking a look at this. Before we go, I will just say, let's read this one slide because I think it's pretty important. Sharplink aims to drive shareholder value by becoming the largest corporate holder of ETH and activating it for yield. Sharplink will accelerate institutional adoption of Ethereum to put it all at the center of global finance. Now, remember, BitMine as well with Tom Lee. Guess what he's trying to do as well? BMNR, you could literally substitute the word Sharplink here for BitMine, and it would probably resonate very well with them as well. So they're also trying to become the largest corporate holder of ETH. So what does that mean, guys? We are still in a race. We are still trying to gobble up as much as we can because ultimately, guys, they think that ETH is undervalued. Remember, we haven't even hit all-time highs. All-time highs were in 2021. We reached about 46, give or take some change, at $4,600. We're still not even at all-time highs. So there's a ton of room to grow here, I believe. None of this is financial advice. Please do your own research. Like I said, I'm giving you resources to do your own research. I'd love if you could. The only other thing on this presentation, I mean, there's a lot on this presentation, but I did like this slide where it does break down a little bit more into the new CEO, co-CEO, which I still find a little silly. Co-CEO, Joseph Chalem, where he led BlackRock Digital Asset Strategy. He built the BlackRock team and executed strategy across stablecoins, and he led the projects to come out with 2 of the largest ETFs, IBIT and ETH, which are Bitcoin ETFs and the Ethereum ETFs, which are both the #1 ETFs in the world. So now he is on Joseph Lubin's team and is the co-CEO of Sharplink Gaming. And then that's it, guys. I really appreciate you guys watching today. Like I said, I've had a ton of success on this so far, and I plan to keep covering all of the details. So follow along if you want to learn some more. Thank you, guys.